Alright everyone, one bit of propaganda that I'm seeing a lot from the legacy media has to do with the border crisis. It's funny because Jen Psaki actually a couple of days ago used the term border crisis and then had to correct herself afterwards. I'm sure there was a little buzzing in her earpiece. Oh my god, quick, reiterate that it's not a crisis. When you have tens of thousands of additional people storming the border in a short period of time to the point where all of your migrant facilities, kid cages are now migrant facilities for unaccompanied minors. Interesting word games the MSM and Biden are playing. That is a crisis. There's no other way to put it. It was funny because there's actually a piece on today, if you go to RCP, it's like, immigrants are not a crisis. Well, that's not what anyone is saying. They're saying the enormous hordes of illegal immigrants storming across a largely open border that's not being defended by the Biden admin has become a crisis through the incompetence of the administration. And that is the truth. There's no other way to put it. Okay, invasive horde, would you prefer to use that linguistic terminology? Anyway, I wanted to point out something here. Trump's border policy was considerably less cruel than Biden's. Because in the MSM, they're like, well, Trump was cruel. Biden is friendly. Trump was mean and bad and hateful. Biden is an angel. It's like literally like night and day, dude. The propaganda is so sheer at this point. If somebody's not noting the difference, if they still clam up with their cognitive dissonance, I've lost any respect for their intellectual capacity. Here's the thing, though. Inviting people in or insinuating that they would be allowed to stay and then putting them in facilities, kicking them back across the border half the time, or resettling them against the will of local communities wherever you want in the United States while potentially handing kids off to human traffickers, I would consider that more cruel than making it clear you're not allowed to come here unless you have a legitimate asylum claim or you're going to go through the legal process. If I were to try to walk across the border to Mexico, I would get accosted by the authorities. They'd be like, what the fuck are you doing? They would process me. I would probably go to jail. If not, they would kick me back across the border. It happens occasionally. There is some trafficking in reverse, drugs and so forth, processed goods. Why is it that the United States, why is it that our government uniquely doesn't seem to comprehend, and I mean, I'm begging the question here, it's rhetorical. Why is it that ours is the only one that's morally incapable of telling other people in the world, hey, you have to go through an actual legal process to become an American? There are plenty of people who legally immigrate to the United States, and they're put on the back burner by the Democrats. The immigration system is already overburdened, the legal one. Other than work visas for frickin' migrant labor, everything else is locked in. You realize how long it takes to legally immigrate to the United States and all the requirements that go into it? Yeah, I would say that's your crisis. The southern border we can guard by putting up a wall. And we were doing that. Hundreds of miles of it were built. Retrofitting existing wall, building something like 100 miles of new wall. Fence, as Richard Spencer would call it, and 30-foot tall fence, foot thick, but okay. It was being built. We had money earmarked for, I think, a couple hundred more miles of largely new wall. And Biden, when he comes in, well, we're not going to do that, man. I can't imagine why are so many people trying to come, and then he has to come out and half-heartedly say, don't come. Don't come. So Biden doesn't have that problem anymore. Like they're going to listen to you, dude. They've already marched halfway across fucking Mexico. They're already on their way here. They've left their homes. They can't get back home. Unless you kick them back across the border, Mexico is going to have to take care of half of these people. And then there are people illegally immigrating from Mexico, again, largely from the Yucatan. There are so many people that don't realize Mexico is large enough so that it has plenty of subgroupings. There's a big difference between some urbanite living in Monterrey and someone living in literally a wooden hut down in the Yucatan in the middle of the jungle. Just so that we're aware, there's a little bit of a difference. It's funny because a lot of times people think of Mexico and they think of like a dude with a sombrero and tequila riding a donkey through the desert. They don't realize that there are a considerable proportion of Mexico's tropical rainforest, essentially. They don't understand the geography because we no longer teach civics or geography in schools, and history, when we teach it at all, is shitty anyway, and it's a bunch of propaganda. Now, Trump told them, don't come, we will deport you, don't bother, and so people weren't marching across Mexico getting raped or human trafficked. That's happening every single day. Hundreds of kids are coming across and being given to human traffickers right now. I guarantee in the future we'll hear a report on how monumental that number was. A report that will be quickly buried. A report that you won't hear until Biden is out of office. Trust me. Just like his political records there that are held by the University of Delaware. You're not going to get to see him until he's out of office or fucking in the ground. Once that happens, it's okay. He doesn't care. They can tarnish his legacy by telling all the people that back in the 70s he was fond of telling jokes about gay people or blacks, and I guarantee that he was, and that's why they're not releasing the records. I can read them like a book. It's not because of Tara Reid. It's because of other considerations that are obviously would sink his political aspirations. Biden says, come on in. Half-heartedly says don't come when he realizes it's politically expedient. Makes no effort to stop the migrant crisis, is underfunding and understaffing facilities for migrants. You know, he cut a bunch of jobs on the border already anyway. You do realize that, correct? And then when they stay in the country, he sends them to a community that doesn't want them. One of the first things that he did was rescind a Trump-era executive order that mandated that communities could choose whether they wanted to take migrants. It's partially political and it's part economic. We're in an economic crisis and you do have political, social issues going on right now. Some communities, it is not safe to put a bunch of migrants there. It's not safe to the migrants, but the Democrats don't give a flying flip. They don't give a fuck. Oh yeah, well you're racist. Fucking here, we're going to give you 1,000 Syrians, 1,000 people from the Yucatan. And so when they end up inevitably forming a sub-block within that community that is highly segregated, that's not welcomed by the locals, and fighting breaks out and it causes crime in both directions, and more derision and more hate, the Democrats will say, well, it's obviously, it's these evil populists, it's evil Trump fans that are doing it. No, you did it. Biden did it. Biden's responsible for this. Who else? He's rescinded half a dozen fucking immigration-related executive orders, like the so-called Muslim ban, which was related to travel to and from countries that had to do with terrorism. Well, that's been rescinded. Well, wonderful, making us a little bit less safe on that end as well. I guarantee there's going to be some problems over the next few years because of what Joe Biden's doing. He's also perceived of as just generally weak. So when he comes out and says, well, man, don't come, we're going to deport you. Yeah, bullshit, says the migrant. Bullshit. He said, who fucking cares what you say, Joe? Everyone knows you're full of shit. You don't think that they have CNN down in Mexico? They don't understand how fucked up Biden is? They don't understand that other people are running the country and that they want to use these people as slaves anyway. They want them in the country. They'll disappear off into sweatshops and brothels and stuff like that, and they'll pay taxes, but they won't be able to vote. They won't be able to vote. They won't be able to get a gun. They won't be able to, they'll basically be chattel. They'll be slaves, servants. They're a serf class. The Democratic Party has helped to create a 10 million strong class of serfs in the United States that it perpetually promises will legalize you this time, will give you a path to citizenship. Dude, they've been talking about that since the 90s. Well, technically the 1980s. The last time you had a meaningful actual attempt at this was Stimson-Mazzoli with Ronald Reagan. Ironically, partially championed by some bleeding heart Republicans that did grant residency to millions of people. But unfortunately they never closed the border, and so the problem just metastasized all over again in the 90s. And Clinton said he would solve it, and Bush said he would solve it, and Obama said he would solve it, and the three of them did absolutely nothing. Well, four of them. Herbert Walker's a footnote in history, so, and he's also the bastard finally kicked it, so, fuck him. Trump is the only one to actually make an attempt. And he was obstructed by his own party for several years. He had to fight the Republicans to get funding for a fucking wall. The Republican Party spent 3 decades promising, we're going to close the border, we're going to get a better wall, we're going to invest in technology and monitor the border better, and then they never wanted to allocate a fucking red cent to it. A continuously underfunded ICE. Now look at it. Well, we almost did it. I think people are going to be begging for Trump back in a few years. It's going to be funny. I hope he runs again and wins, and I hope he goes right back to fixing the problems that Biden has re-unleashed on the United States. All of the problems of the Bush-Obama era, all the way back to the paradigm shift at the end of the 1980s, have gotten worse and worse. Trump began solving them and faced continuous obstruction, more from the rhinos, even at times, than the Democrats. That's about all. Peace out.